Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Michael McSperrin to the conversation. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, Matt. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. So as always, just a very brief introduction from me, how we got to this recording, and then I'll let you do the proper conversation about who you are and tell people all about where you are and what you're doing. So Michael and I, we've known each other for a little while now, I guess, maybe a couple of years even, and through COVID, the world of travel changed quite significantly. I think that's fair to say, as many people will understand listening, but we've stayed connected, followed each other. I know, Michael, you're a big supporter of the work we're doing as well in the mental health space. So, I always love to catch up and chat to people about their own experiences, their own motivations, which is why we're together today recording this conversation. So welcome, Michael. Tell everybody a little bit more about yourself, what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm Michael McSperrin. I'm originally from London. I live out in Krakow now in Poland. Been here for almost 15 years. Professionally, I work for a company called AMS. We're a talent acquisition company. I've been with them since 2010, so a good while now, 12 years. And I am part of the facilities and travel department. So I look after the travel program and kind of office functionality and all those sorts of things. Last couple of years, though, I've been taking a bit of time out. So I've had 2 kids during COVID. I kept myself busy. Yep. So I had my little boy, James, who's coming up to 2.5. He was born just at the beginning of the pandemic, and a little girl, Sophie, she was born in January this year. So yeah, it was an interesting couple of years of dealing with a global pandemic as well as 2 kids for the first time. So that was interesting, should we say? But yeah, I was fortunate that I could get time off from AMS, which was funded by the Polish government. So essentially, in place of my wife taking maternity leave, she's self-employed, so didn't really make much benefit for her. I could go and take paternity leave for 9 months. So I'm currently on paternity leave until January. So I get the daddy time with the 2 little ones, which is great. So I've been married for 7 years. As I say, I'm originally from London. Bit of a background to Poland and Ireland, so I've probably got a bit of an identity crisis. I don't really know where I am or where I'm from. I do know there's a lot of alcohol, there's a lot of Catholic guilt involved in that. Irish and Polish, it's just, that's all you get, really. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Well, it's brilliant. I think we're going to delve a little bit deeper into some of those elements as well, because it's fascinating to have a sort of, a stay-at-home dad a little bit in that for a few months, for that experience you're going through. So it's wonderful. And congratulations on the birth of your 2 children as well. And during COVID, of course, that's never easy, right? For anybody that's been through those experiences. But there's a bigger story to be told here as well. There's a big journey, and the important factor in these conversations is learning more about you and your journey with mental health. And I'm sure all those elements that you've already outlined have a big play on that as well. So I'm going to leave that thought with you, and I'm going to let you tell us a story, Michael. I just want to sort of understand more about your journey with mental health.
Yeah, I mean, mine started well over 20 years ago when I was in my teens. So I didn't have a difficult childhood. I had quite a nice childhood, I would say. Both my parents were teachers. But I didn't really see myself in a positive light. I struggled socially, and I didn't find it easy to kind of make lots of friends and things like that. And when I was 17, I was in my 2nd year of A levels, and believe it or not, I got an ear infection, which everyone gets, once in their lives, I guess. Ear infection that within a week had gone from being a bit of an earache to me being in hospital having surgery to release the pressure.
Wow.
So in that time, I lost the movement on the right side of my face, which you can probably still see to some extent. Quite often people think, are you okay? If I go and see a doctor, they're always worried that I'm having a stroke. And I lost my balance. So I completely lost all sense of balance whatsoever, and the room was just constantly spinning. And I also ended up with tinnitus on my right side as well. All of those I've still got to some extent. My balance is better, but I do still get vertigo attacks, a bit like Meniere's disease, which some people may know about. Okay. And yeah, I mean, I ended up in hospital for about 6 weeks in total, trying to do rehab and everything. Got released, went back in again. And so I went through this really kind of this horrible journey of a 17-year-old being on an adult ward at the hospital. They didn't stick me on the kids ward, but I was surrounded by, elderly people, kind of thinking, right, what do I do here? My A levels, my uni results, my uni applications, everything were kind of all up in the air. It was November time, and I was sitting there thinking, now what? And I remember at the time I was working at WH Smith's part-time on the weekends, and I remember phoning up my boss. I'd had the surgery on the Friday, and I phoned them on the Saturday to say, I'm really sorry, I can't come in today because I just had surgery yesterday, but I'll try and be in tomorrow. Right. My mum was at the other end of the bed, and she just smacked me on the foot and said, you've just had surgery yesterday, you will not be in tomorrow. Right. And Smiths were great, my boss was brilliant, and she said, no, it's all right, you just get better. Yeah. But that was kind of my work ethic coming out at the time. And yeah, everything just kind of crashed away. It took me about 9 months to recover. And by then, I then went to work full time for Smiths. I'd missed that whole year of A levels, and I thought to myself, I'll give myself a year off, work a little bit, earn a little bit of money, really recuperate, really recover, and then go back and do my A levels. And I never did. I never went back. I just loved working. I loved earning money and learning things by doing them. And I thought that was, at the time, I thought that was the best way for me to deal with it. The reality was I was still struggling socially. I was still struggling, with how I looked. To this day, I can still feel the difference when I smile or when I have any facial expressions. I would always walk down the street and people would look at me and people would think, what's wrong with you? Or, what's wrong with your face and those sorts of things. And, you're in your late teens, early 20s, and it hits you, it kind of makes you very self-conscious about yourself. All my school friends had gone off to uni. I was working in retail, and it was a real kind of bumpy journey, I would say, where I didn't really know who I was. I'd lost my identity, and it got to the darkest point was I was stood on the edge of a bridge in southwest London, because I didn't know who I was anymore, and I didn't want to be that person anymore, who was frankly lost. So that twice happened to me, where I stood on that bridge, on two separate occasions. More often than not, I remember the trigger for one of them was just a really bad day at work, and the other trigger I don't even remember. It was so insignificant that I can't even actually remember the second trigger. But I just remember thinking to myself, I just, this is too much. I'm not happy. And the only thing that stopped me at the time was the thought of my family, of my loved ones, and what was going to happen to them. The thought of how would my mum feel? How would my dad feel? How would my wider family feel about hearing that news? They knew that I was struggling. I'd been to the doctor. I'd reached out for help to my GP, and I'd been on antidepressants, but the antidepressants just made me numb. They just made me, what's the word? They made me feel as if nothing. Yeah. They numbed it. So they didn't suddenly make me happy. Everyone calls them happy pills. They're not pills. All they do is they just dull the extreme darkness and just kind of make you feel like you're not really there, So that kind of took me through a period into my early 20s where I changed jobs. I went into recruitment. I then went and worked for Carphone Warehouse for a couple of years in their headquarters. And I think it got to a point where I needed to reset myself. I needed to kind of almost decide who I was. And I couldn't do that back at home in London where I was. And so what I decided was I was going to move to Poland. I was looking to buy a flat over here as an investment. That was 2007, just before the financial crash, when prices were sky high. So my timing couldn't have been better. What happened was I came over, realized everything was too expensive, and I thought, sod it, I'm just gonna go and see what happens. Found a job with a great small family-run business, helping them to run kind of online marketing and printed marketing here in Krakow and around Eastern Europe for tourists. And I spent 2 years with them. I'd initially come over just with the idea in my mind of doing 6 months and see how it goes. Yeah. And 6 months came and went, and 15 years later, I'm still here. But that was probably the 2 years with them really helped me to get over, to some extent, my past. Because I came over here, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know the language. All I had was a job. I needed to find somewhere to live and everything. And it was difficult. It was really hard, but it almost showed me that I could do these things, that I could cope, and it helped me along the way. I had bumps in the way, I had, struggles like anyone would. But as time went by, I joined AMS in 2010, and, that's been a great, kind of stable part of my life since then as well. And yeah, I mean, fast forward 10 years beyond that, because that was rather uneventful, other than meeting my wife, of course, and getting married. Yeah. But then COVID hit, and COVID really wasn't something I was expecting. I remember when it hit, I was in London at the business travel show, and we were all thinking, all right, okay, what does this all mean? How does this all work? What's going to happen? My wife was 7 months pregnant. She was over in London with me. We came back, and a few weeks later, we were all in lockdown. So James was born without me. I wasn't allowed to be there. Yeah. I was asked what my blood type was. I didn't know. So when my wife was in induced labor, I was down at the clinic trying to get my blood type, and they were saying, sorry, we're closed, we can't help you. At that moment, my wife phoned, FaceTimed me, and thankfully all was okay, because I had 3 hours of blackout, no news, no nothing. Right. And all I could hear was him crying in the background. I just collapsed to the ground and bawled my eyes out. And I always say it was the best and worst day of my life, knowing what she was going through, but also, him being okay. Yeah. And then, raising him and dealing with all of that, and coming back to work, that was, for a man, as a guy, that was a strange experience. AMS have been great with me and so supportive, but you can't help but feel nervous that you're going to have a job to come back to when you left in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah. And, people have lost their jobs and everything. And then the week I went back to work in May last year, I think it was 3 days in, my wife, I came back from the office, and my wife was waiting for me with my son. She gave me a piece of paper, said, oh, James has done a drawing for you. I said, oh, that's nice. Right. Opened it up, and it said, we're pregnant again. And then an expletive. And I just went, what? And so that wasn't planned. So that was an interesting conversation with my boss 1 week in.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, so that was interesting. So we then went through a second pregnancy. Yeah. And Sophie, again, she was early induced. But this time, thankfully, I was able to be there. I wanted to be there for my wife because she'd had such a traumatic time. Yeah. So we booked a private suite and just said, look, this is what savings is for, to give you a positive, experience. And so that's what we did. We had that. She had a fair few complications, some difficulties with it. And she was born in the beginning of January, thankfully all okay. But it was funny. November last year, I remember October, November last year, something just hit me. And I don't know if it was, fourth or fifth wave or whatever it was of COVID, having James, another baby on the way. I knew it was a girl, and I just suddenly got overwhelmed, massively overwhelmed. And November last year, I remember just coming to a point where my thoughts became really irrational, where I started thinking that Paulina and the kids would be better without me. that, that I was a burden to them, that I couldn't provide for them. I couldn't give them what they needed. And there was no real rhyme or reason to it. It snuck up on me. And I found myself in a very dark place, having suicidal thoughts again. And I knew straight away what was happening. I knew that these were irrational thoughts, yet I couldn't turn them off. And it was almost like an internal dialogue saying, "Shut up, Michael, you're talking rubbish." But deep down, it was still there. And so I knew I needed to get help. So I reached out to a psychiatrist straight away, got myself onto some meds, and started, seeking some therapy. And I'm still on that journey. It's a mixture of depression and anxiety, which I think the last couple of years have really kind of contributed to. But as my therapist has said, it's also to a large extent, PTSD from what happened to me when I was a teenager. So I mean, I'm on that journey of kind of always aware of it, from what happened to me when I was 17. That was a real trigger of feeling it. And it's always there. I get these balance attacks, or somebody mentions something, or what's wrong with your face or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder, Yeah. And then when I was going through that patch in November and December, January came around and Sophie was born, and I was delighted to have her and everything, but I was still going through a pretty rough period. But I remember thinking to myself, I've been on this journey for 20 odd years now, and it's not showing any signs of ending, because it's not, and it won't. No. It's not something that you can just cure. And so I remember thinking to myself, I feel really crap here. I feel really, really rubbish. And I wanted something good to come out of it. It was almost like this moment of, if I'm going through this, but I knew that I needed help, and I went out and got it, and obviously didn't go through anything that I was thinking at the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that it would maybe help somebody else. So that's when I kind of resolved to, not become some kind of preacher about this, but just to kind of share with other people that it's okay, and, spread a bit of kindness, spread a bit of support and a bit of happiness, because I had it, and I was lucky that I had it, but I didn't feel it. And I know what that's like. It's, when you're going through that dark period, loads of people say, "Oh, but we're here for you. We love you. Come and talk to me," and all those sorts of things. But when you're really down in the depths, you don't want to, because you don't see the point. You don't see the self-worth. You think that people are just saying that for the sake of saying it. Yeah. And you don't believe it, even though, it's your own flesh and blood. It's your mother, your dad, your brother, your sister, your best mate. Yeah. And you just go, "Oh." And that's what happened to me last November. My best mate is like a brother to me. And I didn't reach out to him. And it was only one of my LinkedIn posts a few months later that he just happened to come across. Yeah. And he phoned me straight away and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "Well, mate, you've got 3 kids, you've got everything going on with you, and he's gone through his own journey as well." And I just didn't want to burden him. I didn't want to, kind of go to him saying, "I'm feeling really crap," And so that's where I am now. I have weekly therapy sessions, and I go see my psychiatrist once a month as well to check on the right meds, because obviously you're very lucky if you get on the right meds on the first go. And I'm in a phase now where, I spend so much time with my kids that I want things to be better for them. I want them to grow up in a world where they can talk about their feelings, where they can talk about whether they're happy or sad or whatever it might be, so that hopefully for generations to come, it's not a taboo like it may have been in the past.
Wow. It's a big thing, isn't it? But I think that's great. I think that's great.
I'll breathe.
Yeah, you can take a breath for a moment. Let me summarize where we're at in there. It's incredible, and like I always say, and I've said it a million times, but I love the fact that you can really connect and you can share that story to people, and I don't love the thought you've been through it. Of course, that's what I would always say. It's the love of the fact that I can just listen to you talking honestly and genuinely about the experiences you've been through, and that's the beauty of this conversation. It's really, I still see you as the amazing person you were before I learned about your journey, and I now see you as an even more amazing person because of your journey, and it's that big challenge, isn't it, societally? And we had a little conversation before we came to this recording, and I think one of the observations that I gave was not many men are doing these conversations in this format because maybe there's a fear, maybe there's a what are your thoughts around that? Because obviously we're two men who are coming together to talk about mental health openly, and we don't hide. So
and I think, it's funny. I mean, the last few years, you've had a lot of celebrities, football players and people like that coming out to talk about this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's still done very quietly. It's almost as if I don't want to say this too loudly, but all right, I'll go and do it quietly.
Yeah.
But then nobody knows that it's happening, right? Yeah. And I think the hardest thing for a man, I found it quite hard when I started talking about my feelings. My wife told her parents, for example, and they were shocked. They thought, well, crikey, what does this mean? Is he okay? Do we need, what do we need to do? And I think as a guy in particular, you kind of feel as if there's an expectation for you to just get on with things. And I think that's the hard part, is to acknowledge and admit that you're human and that you can go through these emotions. I'm a bit of a weeper. I'll have a good cry. And I've done that, at work sometimes. I've done it with my bosses in the past. And I remember years ago, I was really embarrassed about it. And I remember the first time it happened, I said to my boss at the time, I said, I'm so sorry. Something came over me. It will never happen again. And she said to me, don't ever apologize for that. Don't ever be sorry for showing your emotions. Yeah. And she was grateful for me for actually being honest and open. And I think for a guy, there's almost, this element of not losing face, not losing your reputation or whatever it might be. It's survival of the fittest, and let's show how macho we are and everything else. Yeah. And that's all well and good, but how many times are we going to talk about the number of, young men that are killing themselves, as the highest killer of guys, whatever, under 30 or under 40?
Yep.
That's got to stop. And that's where I think, conversations like this really, I would hope will help and give others confidence. Because otherwise, do we all really want to just be miserable? It's not really a nice thing to do, is it?
I don't think we're set out to be miserable, are we? I think it comes about because of a certain set of things that happen, or certain circumstances or events or things, and it's so difficult, isn't it? Especially in this moment in time. Again, it's another conversation we've already had, but there's a lot of negatives out there, and it's not easy to find positives. We just want the sun to shine and people to be happy. That's the key, right? And it's so difficult at times to find that, especially with the world that we're in right now. It's not easy, is it? And it's so challenging. A quick, if I can ask you a question about, in terms of sort of with your wife, of course, she was going through, the experience of becoming a mother, and then obviously you were struggling a bit with your mental health. How did she, find that balance? How was she able to support you? Were you talking to her about it? I guess is probably the first question.
So at the beginning, I didn't want to. She'd had problems with her pregnancy with James, and so then problems started with Sophie as well. Not mentally, but just physical, blood level things. And I was petrified of telling her, because I didn't want to put that weight on her. I didn't want to give her something else to worry about. She was worried about herself and worried about the baby. But in the end, I knew I had to. And I did it I suppose in maybe a typical male way of, I said, look, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm doing about it. Okay. You don't need to worry about me.
Yeah.
I'll be fine. And kind of brushed it to one side. Of course, she read through the lines and knew what was going on. but I had to tell her, because she knew that something wasn't right. She could see that I was irritable, that I was, that I'd lost any kind of sense of drive or motivation with anything, and I just wasn't very happy with myself. So credit to her, what she did and what she went through was frankly remarkable, and I'm now a true believer of women are incredibly stronger than men in many, many ways. It's not about physical strength necessarily, but the mental strength and the ability they have to give birth to a child and to go through that pregnancy for 9 months and all the things that come with it, I think is outstanding. It's a true magical piece of life. That's kind of where I want, why I wanted to go on paternity leave. I wanted to break down those barriers as well to some extent. And I know I'm lucky to have that. I'm very lucky to have that opportunity to do that. Not that very few men will have the opportunity to take 9 months off from work and look after their kids. But I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And hands down, it is the best job I have ever had and I will ever have. I absolutely love being a dad. The kids will scream and shout and everything else, and I'll be changing nappies and all that sort of stuff, but I love it. I absolutely love it. It's the most rewarding thing, to get, just before I came to log on to talk to you, my little boy James came up to me and just said, Daddy, go. And I was like, yeah, Daddy's going, but I'll be back. Okay. And it melts my heart every time. And I know when I walk in that door later on, he will literally come running up to me and give me the biggest hug. And it doesn't matter what's happening. That just melts everything else away. And that's something I've really come to value and treasure, particularly over the last couple of years. Is that time with him and with Sophie as well. And it's nice to see it from the angle of what women have been going through for so many years. If I was going to say anything to any father, if you get your time to get off with kids, do it. Absolutely do it. Because it's worth every penny. Absolutely worth every penny. And the kids will love you for it in years to come. They really will. If we can get more guys doing that, if we can get more men taking their allowance or even maybe taking a bit more to help, then it won't be such an imbalance and it won't be such a fear factor for women when they go on maternity leave and come back thinking, have I got a job to come back to? Because if men and women are going through that process, well, then we shouldn't be afraid of anything. We should be happy and able to embrace parenthood. And then come back to the world of work with all of our new multi-skills or multitasking skills that we've established over time, and bring those to the world of work.
I love that. And it's, I think that just is a reminder, isn't there? There's two parents here.
Absolutely.
And it often it's lean on one parent to do everything and be the big sort of the lead of the parenting community within that household. And I think that's great. And I will say to you though, Michael, cherish those moments when your little boy comes running to you at the door, because having teenagers in my house, that doesn't tend to happen. It's very, very unusual even to get a noise when I walk through the door. let alone a child come running to me. So
and that's why I'm taking that leave now at the beginning. When they're too little, all I'll get is a little bit of a cry or a weep. That's fine. But absolutely.
But look out for that. Seriously, it will change very suddenly, and you won't see it coming. So,
it'll just happen overnight.
That's when you go and get a dog or something. Who genuinely replaces that. I do believe that's what happened in my house. Actually,
really.
My dog's going to be 10 years old just coming up, so happy birthday to him soon. But it's sort of, he's the one that constantly, whenever I walk through the door now, he's always there, to say hello. We're coming right to the end, and I just can't believe it, because this just feels like it's just, we've only just started, and I feel there's a million questions we could talk about and ask. So in terms of a sort of a final wrap from you, I just want you to sort of just say a few final thoughts, Jerry Springer style, just a few final thoughts from you, what you want to do, passions and things with all of this conversation about mental health.
I really want to promote people talking about it, particularly men. That for me is a really key thing. I want to see that improve. I want to see men embrace their feelings and embrace the fact that they can talk to one another. They can talk to their wives, their partners, their parents, whoever it needs to be. And there's professional help out there. And I also really want, dads to feel like they can be dads and not be ashamed of it or not be embarrassed about it. I think we've come a long way. I think it's a lot better than it would have been decades ago. But, there's still, fathers out there who feel like, well, I just need to go out and earn the money. I need to go out and bring home the bread. And, they're missing out on so much. They're missing out on that huge amount. So I would love, anyone who ever wants to have a chat or talk about it, I'd love for people to reach out and say hello. When I'm back at work, I'm looking forward to seeing my colleagues as well, because AMS do a great amount of work on that sort of stuff. So hopefully, I can get more involved in those sorts of things in the future. As I said, spread a bit of kindness. It doesn't cost us anything. So,
and you're absolutely right. Spread a bit of kindness. And what I found fascinating was I was just sort of thinking about how we got to this recording. And I know I always mention it at the beginning, we've been connected for a while, but you did spread some kindness recently because you reached into me when you saw I was struggling with some stuff. And I think that's just the beauty of it, isn't it? We don't have to live together. We don't have to live in each other's pockets all the time. But sometimes, and I just send that as a message to everybody listening, really, is if you see something that you think is not right, or if you're worried about somebody, is just reach in. It's half the time we ignore it and we just think, oh, somebody else will reach in and do that. It will all be fine. And you know what? It's really powerful. And so thank you for reaching in, Michael. I genuinely do. And that's where we started saying, well, maybe we should get together and have a chat about this stuff. Talking of men bringing home the bread, you're sat in your wife's cafe. Although it's not a bread, I don't know if it's a bread cafe, but there's definitely lots of cake in the background as well.
Plenty of cake.
For everybody that's listening, you won't be able to see it, but I genuinely did have a little tour of the cake stand, the delicatessens counter behind him. I wish I could eat it. I really do, but it's so far away. Listen, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure. And as you say, if anybody's listening, they do want to reach out. If they do want to ask you any questions, if there's any men out there who want to chat to another fellow about, whatever it is, you can reach into either Michael or myself. You're more than welcome to. Just look after yourselves, everybody. This is what it's all about. We need to take notice when things are changing. We don't often know, well, sometimes we don't know, and we just sort of live through that and just expect to get better. And actually, there's no shame in reaching out. Really, there shouldn't be. We've got to break down these barriers and these stigmas and all the other wonderful things that we put up in the way of talking openly about mental health. That's what this is all about, really. So brilliant stuff. Michael, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time and for sharing your story. It's been amazing to listen to you. And I look forward to seeing you, hopefully, Business Travel Show next year, maybe. You're going to be
crossed. That's my plan. That's my plan.
There you go. I'll be tracking you down for a hug, because that's what I tend to do.
Absolutely.
All the best, buddy, to you and your family. Look after yourselves. And I hope you keep well.
Cheers.
Take care. See you soon.